Welcome to TechCentric Planet, where we offer a glimpse to the future of humanity through the lens of technology.
We've sought out innovators and founders who are interested in providing solutions to some of our most fundamental human-centric problems with a view to help our planet.
I am Mary Beth Hosking, and my co-host is the sagacious Professor Martin Parr.
On this episode, we have Lara Wilde, who will be discussing AgriFood Catalyst, an organisation that is supporting an Australian food identity that is commercially viable, unites Australians, and tells the Australian story in collaboration with farmers and First Nations food businesses to be environmentally sustainable and strategic. Welcome, Lara.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Great to have you on board.
So, are you guys big fans of Australian food? Are you completely and utterly committed to our cause here?
Well, I am, because if another tourist asks me where they can get a meat pie, I think I'm going to scream and pull my hair out, Lara, just to be really honest. There is more to Australian cuisine than meat pies, lamingtons, and a pie floater. And if anyone is listening to this and they're from Adelaide, they'll totally understand the pie floater reference.
It's not just Adelaide, and a lot of people talk about meat pies and lamingtons, but we get a lot blander than that. I mean, pavlova is just bad egg whites jammed with cream and fruit. Like, there is absolutely nothing going for a pavlova. Fairy bread, that's the most poverty-struck meal of all time, and yet we claim it proudly, and it's so sad.
I don't even, if there's anyone listening to this podcast in the US, fairy bread, you get a piece of white bread, the whitest white bread with no nutritional value whatsoever. You slather that piece of bread with butter about half an inch thick.
Oh, no, sorry, Mary Beth, I'm going to interrupt you there. The good ones have butter. The bad ones have margarine.
Oh, yeah, okay, my bad. And then you take, what are they called? The hundreds and thousands?
Hundreds and thousands.
And you sprinkle that on the bread, and then you cut it into quarters, and you serve that. Yeah. That's
quite something.
And then, of course, we have the practical joke of foods, which is Vegemite, where we feed that to unsuspecting Americans, and, it's wrong.
Watch them spread it like peanut butter.
Yeah.
That is quite
we are
absolutely
cruel. We're cruel. It's the drop bears, though. We've always had people watch out for the drop bears because they'll kill you.
And hoop snakes.
And that's it. That's right.
Yeah.
Let's get cracking. Let's talk to you about your innovation.
Yeah,
Martin?
absolutely. Lara, so tell us about your innovation and how it will help society and the planet.
So at the core of all wonderful things is food. If you want to bring people together, it's always about Thanksgiving dinner, it's about Christmas lunch, it's about birthday cake. That is the one thing that unites people the world over. Anthony Bourdain, the man was amazing. He traveled all over the world and he introduced so many cultures over a dinner table. And through those stories, he not only told us about, hey, there's this dish and grandma makes it and it's fantastic, but he could also tell us why it was significant to that culture and to those people and what it meant to them. And so when you start to deep dive into what it takes for these foods to become household names, then you can start looking at where people come from, what was their story in getting there. And I love the opportunity for people to connect over a meal. I had a client in Cairns, her name was Zainab, and this woman, oh my gosh, I may have had a girl crush. She was not only gorgeous, she not only traveled the world, she not only spoke multiple languages, she not only had multiple university degrees, but she was just one of the most beautiful, sweet people you've ever met. And she was making a product called Basisa. And she said she was really, really struggling to sell it because no one in Cairns knew what Basisa was. Now, Basisa traditionally was something that Roman soldiers, so it's a mix of grains and herbs and spices, and if you mix it with a little bit of water, you end up with a complete meal. So Roman soldiers back in the day would take a pouch of this basisa and then they'd add a bit of milk or a bit of water and they would have a nutritious meal on the road. In the Middle East, every family had their own recipe that was their own unique blend of herbs and spices that they would pass down from generation to generation. So Zainab had hers, and she said, no one knows what basisa is, so it's really hard to sell. And I said, don't be ridiculous. I know lots of Middle Eastern people in Cairns. And so I reached out to friends of mine who had lived all through the Middle East and through Europe. And when I said, would you be interested in a locally made basisa? They were like, oh, I can get basisa here. And suddenly she had this whole community of people who had connected over a food that was traditional to their home, and they could come together and share it. So that's what I love about food. Obviously, there's also the taste. And when I began in this industry, I was a size 2, but I'm really committed to supporting food manufacturers. So I keep trying everything. But that's what excites me about the agri-food industry. And when we start talking about the agri part of agri-food, then we're talking about where it comes from. And is it grown sustainably? Is it grown respectfully? Particularly when we start talking about Indigenous foods in Australia, does it pay homage to the traditional people who farmed it, who harvested it, who have a story? They might have a totem animal. My friend Jack, for instance, will never eat barramundi because that's his animal. And so there's a whole culture that comes behind it that needs to be shared. But also when we start looking at that, then that's sustainable for a reason. It may seem that it's just culture and tradition and rote, that it's passed down through generation, but we also don't end up eating all of the barramundi because there's certain people who won't eat it. So there's so much opportunity for us to connect as people, but also connect with our environment over a meal. What we do at AgriFood Catalyst is we really want to share that passion and share that story, but we want to support people to do it sustainably. I have a lot of clients who have come to me with their passion for food. I had a policeman once who was convinced that he was going to make his fortune with olive-flavored ice cream. And he wasn't, really. That's all it came down to. But, I like
you were going to... I thought you were going to say dip. Olive dip,
no.
Yeah. And then you lost me with the ice cream.
Olive tapenade, no worries at all. Olive ice cream, no. That's it's very rare that I will completely poo-poo someone's idea and say that's not going to work. I will always kind of lead them there until they come to that conclusion. But yeah, it was a hard no on olive-flavored ice cream. I'm also a hard no on avocado jerky. I would rather eat a Dunlop Folly. It's horrible, horrible stuff. But so what we like to do is we like to start playing with these foods and find alternative uses for them. So, for example, in Australia, in the avocado industry, we have only half of our trees currently in production. An avocado tree can take up to 4 years to hit full fruiting production. So the majority of trees in Australia are not 4 years old yet. And so the number of avocados we have in Australia is due to double in the next 2 to 4 years. Having said that, we can buy an avocado in a major supermarket for $1 a piece out of New Zealand. So imagine this, you can grow them in New Zealand, ship them all the way to Australia. All the middlemen have taken their cut out of that supply chain, and we're still only paying $1 for a piece of fruit. How are Australian farmers going to compete with that? And how do we start thinking outside the square? So it could be that, yes, we have avocados. I love avocado on toast, avocado on a salad, great. What else can we do with an avocado? So then we can look at, it's a vegan alternative to make a chocolate mousse or an ice cream. We've got people freeze drying it, turning it into a powder, and then using it as a thickening agent for smoothies. We have got it as, in Asia, it's huge to have avocado milkshakes. And so you can start substituting your dairy with the avocado. But then also, can I make leather out of the skins? Can I do oil out of the seed? What are my other options for the avocado? And so how do we start exploring what value add manufacturing we can do that's commercially viable? Is that enough of me talking for a minute?
Wow, that is great.
Yeah.
I kind of think you answered the question that I'm about to ask, because it comes from a love of, almost sounds like it comes from a love of food, a love of tradition, and a love of respect. But why did you decide to get into this space, I guess, or develop this idea, this solution, and work with individuals in Australia to sort of help that? I guess it's that you made mention when we were talking in the prep side of things, Lara, about feeding the world, but I think that there's more to it than that. But I'd love to know why, your why.
And so we've worked with clients through Papua New Guinea and Vanuatu and so on as well. And it's not an Australia-specific thing, but I do have a bias. I am Australian and I do like Australians better. And look, my other passions on the side are giant, fast cars. So I'm not a very good hippie. I'm not a very good greenie by the book. But to be honest, the reason I started doing this was because of people. and because of that love for people to come together, for people to be able to contribute. They want to be able to share what's special to them. And the most special thing you can do is feed someone. So to be able to support them to do that, but also to support Australian farmers. They're some of the best farmers in the world. They are putting so much time and energy and money into farming responsibly in Australia and making sure that our impact as primary producers is felt globally. This is not a case of, hey, if I get some bananas left over, I'm going to have bananas in the paddock. But what does that mean globally as far as what our contribution to greenhouse gases is, or our contribution to erosion, to pollution, to carbon and so on? And so our primary producers in Australia, we're doing a great job at that. How do we support them? And the easiest way for people to support them is with their grocery budget, with their wallet. How do we educate people? And I was having this conversation this morning in the native food space, and someone who also works in the native food space said, oh, it's all very well to want to support Indigenous foods, but apart from those couple of Indigenous-owned businesses who've given me samples, I don't buy it. I don't go to a major supermarket to buy Davidson plum paste. I still, like, you consumer habits, I still just buy plum jam. Or, you know, I don't go there. And so on the one hand, yes, it's a consumer piece of how do I educate people about what Australian food is? So when they go in there and they have a choice between sesame seed or wattle seed, which one do they pick? When they have a choice between a Davidson plum paste or a fig paste for their cheese platter, which one do they pick? And we want to develop that brand loyalty, and we want people to be educated. By the same token, we need to remind them that there's a lot of foods on our dinner plate now that we take for granted that are native foods, that are Australian by identity, and they have become commonplace grocery items. Barramundi, you know, is a thing that everyone goes, oh yeah, I'll have the barramundi, that's the best fish. Great, but when you do that, do you think this is a native ingredient from Australia? This goes back to a culture and a people that is millennia old, and they have stories and they have tradition around that. And do we as Australians, when I have visitors come to my house, do I tell them, hey, we're going to have barramundi tonight, it's actually an Australian food, and this is why it's significant to where I live in the world?
No, you wouldn't.
No. Macadamia nuts. There's a native food in Australia, and how many ways can I have macadamia nut? But when I eat it, do I think, like when I eat basisa, I think, oh, this is something Roman soldiers ate, and this is something from my friend Zainab, and this is a part of her culture. But when it comes to Australian food, and I have visitors from overseas, what am I sharing with them from my culture?
That's so interesting. What I find really interesting about that is my son, when he was younger, he did a reciprocal exchange with a Chinese exchange student. And so the student came over here and lived with us for 6 weeks and then went back. And I really wanted to introduce him to different things that are Australian. And so I went, you know, seeking I love lemon myrtle. I think I've talked to you about that. I love lemon myrtle. It's like, I'll make tea cake, I'll make this, I'll make that, cookies. But I made sure that we had macadamias and all of these things that were more Australian ingredients, so that he actually could appreciate more than just the meat pie. Like lamb, Australian lamb. Now, he didn't enjoy the lamb, but he tried the lamb because he wanted to try as much as he could that what is Australian. What he'd read about is Indigenous to Australia. And it really got me to thinking. And what made it really interesting was when my son went back to do his exchange in China, I wanted to give him things that were made in Australia. Oh my God. It was nearly impossible to give him things made in Australia. Everything was made in China. And I said, I'm not giving you stuff to take back. So it was very interesting, really interesting. But I think, Martin, I think you've got another question for Lara.
Yeah, absolutely. What hurdles did you face when developing this? What would you have done differently?
Oh, what would I have done differently? In that Indigenous First Nations food space in particular, I find it so frustrating. So this is a multi-million-dollar industry, Indigenous foods in Australia. Less than 2% of that industry is owned by Indigenous people. Now, if you told me that the female-owned food business in Australia was worth millions and millions and millions of dollars, and less than 2% of the players in that industry were women, I'd be ropeable. Yeah. And that was one of the reasons we began. And so there becomes two very distinct conversations in this Indigenous food space. One is around community economic development. So if I am an Aboriginal community and we can go out and wild harvest lemon myrtle, and then we can bring it in and we can sell it, we can create jobs, we can create industry, we can do skills and training, we have a product to sell. And that's lovely. But then the flip side of, that's, it's not easily scalable, but it's very good for the soul, it's good for the community, it brings people together, it gives them purpose, and it allows them to share stories. The flip side of that is I have an Indigenous-owned business that is making a lemon myrtle rub, and they want to share it with the world. And how do we help them to commercially scale it? And how do we help them then to market it, reach export markets, get into major supermarkets? That's a completely different conversation. We have had people who have told me, well, Indigenous foods, you can't scale them to major, you're not going to have them at Woolworths and Coles and so on. They are for the top shelf of the boutique deli in Melbourne, and they're going to be top price, and it's limited edition, and you might get that Davidson plum paste this week, but you won't get it next week. And so it's an unreliable supply chain, and, you know, a restaurant won't necessarily put it on their menu because they don't know if they will get it again next week to the same quality and the same standard, which is ridiculously pathetic as an industry for us to let that fly. There's so much more opportunity for us to support those businesses and apply the same commercial tests that we do for any other product. But we also have a lot of dispute in that First Nations food space about what is an Indigenous food. So is it about the ownership of the land it was grown on? Is it about it being a native ingredient? Is it about the ownership of the business that's making the food? Is it about the food itself? Every Aboriginal community I've ever worked with has its recipe for a chicken curry. We have such a strong Asian influence through Northern Australia that everyone has a version of a chicken curry. And so is that now an Indigenous food? When I did a series of cookbooks in the Kimberley at one point, when I came across to North Queensland, I said to my friend Jack, I'd love to do a cookbook with traditional recipes out of communities in the Cape. And Jack said, oh, I've got a great recipe for bully beef, which spam, you know, it's tinned hooves and lips and ears and things. And he said, I've got this great recipe for bully beef, and we should put that in there. And I said, bully beef's not an Indigenous food, it's tinned meat. He's like, no, well, as an Aboriginal person growing up, I ate a lot of bully beef, so therefore it is an Indigenous food. So suddenly I've got something that is culturally significant, something with a native ingredient that's made by an Indigenous person, is grown on an Indigenous person's land. And then if we look at some of the organisations we've worked with who have grown, so for example, Fig Jam & Co, based out of Brisbane, father and son team, amazing products. And they were really scaling up. They're just absolutely amazing, Jacob and Jason. And they were getting a lot of amazing export contracts. Now, two things they faced for that is, one, a lot of the native ingredients are listed as novelties, not as actual foods. So when you try to export them, they're not listed as foods because even though Aboriginal people have been eating them for millennia, they're not considered food yet unless we can prove that so many people have eaten it. So one, they had to go through to get those foods listed. Right. And the second thing they faced was the translation. So saltbush was translated as saltpeter, and so they couldn't take that product into that country because it was considered to be explosive. So really simple things for us to have to deal with, but these were some of the hurdles that we faced just in that First Nations food space. When we talk about the non-Indigenous farming, probably the biggest challenge we have in Australia is this perception that farming is what old white men do and that they're backwards, and it's where you go if you can't get an education and you can't have a real career somewhere else. You inherit the farm and you drive a tractor and chase a cow. And yet some of the tech that's coming through in the agricultural space is just mind-blowing.
Next level. Yep.
Yeah, like facial recognition in chickens. Why do we, I don't even know why we need that, but I'm very excited we have it.
I've got a question. So AI cannot do anything with if I go into AI and I want it to give me, you go into into Dolly on those sort of applications and you say, okay, so give me different images of Mary Beth. It doesn't recognize that I have red hair and it makes me a brunette. Yet we've got facial recognition that recognizes the different faces of chickens.
And we even have redhead and brunette chickens. I would suggest
that's so good. That is.
I would
amazing.
suggest you're using the wrong AI app because that exists. You just haven't got
Oh, it
the right
might
one.
exist now, but it didn't about 6 months ago. I think I complained enough about it that I said, "What is it? Is it because I'm the redheaded stepchild?"
That AI, that facial recognition of chickens has been around for 10 years. If we talk about,
crazy.
if we talk about GPS. So, for instance, you get your big spray tractors that spray weeds. Now, back in the good old days, they would just spray everything in the paddock. And what you would do is pick it according to the leaf. So if your leaf is long and has all the veins going parallel, you can put out and that's the crop. Say it's corn that you're growing. And you want to spray all of the weeds that have a leaf that's sort of branched, like all the veins in it a branch rather than straight lines. You would spray for that type of leaf and it would kill everything that didn't have the long straight leaf, so your corn would be okay. What they do now is they have these tiny cameras set up in the front of the boom, and as it goes along it can identify that exact weed that you want to target and it sprays that weed and that weed only. So you're not wasting all of this chemical, it's not going into your runoff, and you're just targeting those weeds that you want to target.
Wow.
And again, that's been around for 15 years. Easy.
So, Lara, what did the naysayers say when, and how did you push on when things got tough with what it is that you're doing in this agriculture space?
The naysayers will tell you that's the way it's always been. So I began my agricultural journey growing up on a cattle station. I had a contract mustering business and I used to go out and work with these old cattlemen and, they're fourth generation or something. And they, you could hear banjos in a lot of that country. And
I'm just thinking of Blazing Saddles. I'm really sorry.
Yeah, no, not that shiny and new. But they would tell you, we do it this way because that's the way Granddad did it. And you'd go to it's not necessarily a good example of farm management, but there was one, for example, that every Christmas they would cut their ham in half and put it in 2 handbags. And I would say, why don't you just put it in one? Why do you cut it in half? And they're like, oh, because you have to do it that way. That's why Mum did it. So I went to Mum and said, why do you cut it in half? And she said, well, that's why Grandma did it. So that's why we do it. And I went, all right. So I went to Grandma and said, why do you always cut the ham in half? She said, well, my handbag will only fit half a ham. So I have to do it that way. Now, everyone else could have gone with, but we don't question it, right? We have respect for our elders and we do it this way. And that's probably the biggest thing is when I talk about, hey, let's try something new. Let's give this a go. Let's discuss options. And you'd think it would be the farmers sticking their toes in the mud and going, no, this is the way we all do it. I get just as much pushback from the other end who are not willing to engage. So, for example, working in regenerative farming, the sustainable farming space, and we have dozens of non-government organisations out there who are like, we're going to teach farmers how to farm with regenerative practices. Now, first of all, I don't know if you're aware of this, but farmers, in my experience, are some of the cheapest people on the planet, and they recycle purely because they refuse to throw anything out. They will, that same ute will be going for the rest of its life. That tractor will be held together with baling twine, and it will still be going because we're not buying another one until that one's buried. And even when it's buried, it will be buried for spare parts for the next one. So primary production, by its very culture, is a recycler. They reuse everything they can. They don't throw out anything if they can help it. And yet we have a number of organisations out there who are like, we're going to teach them to be zero waste. We're going to teach them to recycle. We're going to teach them with compost. And it's something that growers have been doing for a very long time. But there's this disconnect. And people think farmers are dumb and old and they're just raping and pillaging the land and they're irresponsible. But they're really not. They're very, very conscientious of their impact on the environment. And wouldn't you be? I mean, if you consider, if your business was a restaurant, you would make sure that every chair was functional, wouldn't you? This is their business. Yeah. And the other thing to consider about the agri-food industry and primary producers is these guys, they're not going to school and then going to uni and deciding to open a business in farming as a rule. They're fourth generation. And when they're farming, they're not looking at an exit strategy of, I will sell it. They're looking at an exit strategy of, my kids will inherit this and my grandkids will inherit this. And they're planning for the next 50 years or 100 years. There's not a lot of cafes doing that. And so I think that's so one of the big things I see is the people who are trying to save the farmers and save the environment. And we just need to take a moment and acknowledge that these guys are, and girls, are very much doing the very best they can with the resources and the knowledge they have, and they're constantly looking for ways to improve. We've got farms up here who have spent millions of dollars to be zero waste. And the facilities, like there's a mushroom farm that's been built recently. It even recycles the hot air that comes out of the facility back into the cooling system. Like it's that level of recycling. Absolutely. Yeah. And at the end of the day, the place I see that it falls over is with the consumer, who grabs another plastic bag off the roll and puts their 3 avocados in it. That's where the environment gets impacted the most, I feel.
But I really have to ask the question, why? Why do they feel the need to wrap a continental cucumber in plastic? I still don't quite understand that.
So the one that I also struggle with that, but the one that gets me is bananas. So
bananas in plastic.
Well, there's bananas in plastic, but I have got banana growers who are throwing out 50 ton a day of green bananas
because they're not pretty enough and they're not the right size. And
well, they can't be too big, they can't be too small. So when you see, well, you may not see it down there, guys, but in far north Queensland, you often see roadside banana stands, and they're small bananas because they weren't big enough to go to the supermarkets. And they're the perfect size banana. I've only just discovered this because I used to always get the banana from the supermarket and then eat half, and then the next day I'd have half. These are perfect size. But the supermarkets decided what size they should be, but even to the point of there must be 3 at the back and 2 at the front. So if one is blemished, that farmer has to throw out all 5. And so being the passive aggressive petty person I am, I like to go into the supermarket and just break up the perfect bunch of 5 and take 2 and leave 3 behind. But that's purely cosmetics. There's no other reason for that argument. And yet we're talking about people throwing out 50 tons of bananas a day because they don't meet this magic configuration, or they're too big or too small.
And we've got people starving on the streets, homeless without any food. I mean, that's ridiculous. But I think, Martin, you've got another question?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, sorry, we're running a little bit short of time. What would you like to see happen with your innovation now?
I would like consumers to take more responsibility. And it's something a year or 2 ago, when we had a lot of flooding down in southeast Queensland, and the Gatton Valley, which grows the majority of lettuces and leafy greens and so on, like they do all the McDonald's and whatnot in Australia, all of that crop was lost. And suddenly people were paying $10 for a head of lettuce, which was ludicrous. And everyone was up in arms. And it was like, well, you've created this, though. As consumers, we have to take responsibility for how we shop. You know, we could be shopping at local markets. We can be shopping from the local suppliers who go around the farms and collect things. We can be shopping in season. We can, just be looking for it. Now, if you're thinking, I'll go to the supermarket and I'll get the odd bunch or the fugly or whatever, the farmers don't get paid for that product, and it's not that much cheaper. So if you're going to go to a supermarket, buy the good stuff so the farmers get paid something. But yeah, as consumers, we have to take more responsibility for this. And that goes down to, hey, next time you've got visitors, even if you've got visitors from interstate, if you guys come and visit me in Queensland, not just what can I show you that's Australian food, what can I show you locally? Like, have you ever had a mangosteen? Have you ever had a buoy? Have you ever had jackfruit? How can I show you my local foods? I do live in paradise as far as food goes, but how do we as consumers start telling the story of where our food comes from? The state that does it the best, in my experience, is Tasmania. If you go and stay at a B&B there, they will tell you the bacon is grown by Joe down the road, and this jam was made by Francine up there. And so they really tell the story of their local foods and where it comes from. They take great pride in that quality. But yeah, we have the opportunity as consumers to do that, and I think that's where I'd like to see this innovation I don't even know if innovation's the right word, but us supporting primary producers and us supporting our food identity and connecting as human beings.
Wow, that is amazing. Awesome. And yes, you're right.
Yeah.
I'm a farmer's market girl myself. I'll go to the farmer's market because I actually know, I said to them on Saturday when I was at the farmer's market, any asparagus? That's not in season anymore. And I went, right. So if I have to go to Coles and do my shopping at a supermarket and I see all that asparagus, I know that's been in a freezer somewhere. Now we're at the fun bit of the podcast.
It's not just, it's not in a freezer. Like apples can be in a cold room storage for a year before you get to them.
Okay. And they're so pithy and flowery and no. I'm a farmer's market person. If I see it and it's there, I get my avocados. I get all those things that are grown locally or within 100 kilometres of where I live, which is local for us. And that's what I do. And it just lasts forever and it tastes so good.
Yeah.
I recently had an experience. Sorry, Martin.
I was going to say it's very true, isn't it? The difference in taste between supermarket grown things and something that you get in a farmer's market is massive. And yeah,
I'm willing
to spend. Much better.
I'm willing to spend $80 to grow my own tomatoes because they taste so much better than what I could buy in the shop for $1.80. But I also recently tried to go and buy some local produce for a friend of mine. It was her birthday and she loves Dutch cream potatoes. And so I thought, perfect birthday gift for a woman. I'll get her a couple of kilos of potatoes. And so I went to buy some local Dutch cream potatoes for her. And when I went to my local co-op, they said, oh, yes, these ones are from Brisbane. And I thought, that defeats the purpose. You're my local co-op. Why am I coming here to buy fruit and veg that's all the way from Brisbane? So, yes, I still ask. Don't trust that just because you're at a market, it's locally grown.
Yeah,
I'm lucky with the market that I go to because I know the farmers, and I've been going to this market for a very long time. So I'm very proud of that market. I love it. But we're at the pointy end of the podcast. This is the dreaded final question that we ask all of our guests, and we're going to ask it of you, Lara. And I know you said you've given this a little bit of thought. So, if you found yourself awake in front of aliens bent on destroying the planet, how would you convince them not to in 25 words or less?
Well, I think it would be really simple after our conversation tonight to know my answer. I'd feed them. I mean, I would not cook because I'm a terrible cook, but I would simply put out a platter of the very best Australian food that we have to offer. And I think the freshness, the flavours, the stories, the people would convince them it's completely worth saving.
Oh, I love that.
Is that 25 words? I've never done 25 words or less in a sentence.
It is beautiful. It is beautiful.
Absolutely.
Yes.
That's amazing. Perfect. Okay, well, thank you for joining us on TechCentric Planet. I would like to thank Lara Wilde and my co-host Mary Beth Hosking.
Join us for our next episode where we tease out another amazing innovation designed to help humanity. And remember, if you've thought of a problem, chances are someone out there is developing a solution for it.
Absolutely. Goodbye.
Bye.